Welcome to The Mountain in Us, a podcast where the journey gets its voice. I am Taran Singh, your host. Here we greet the thrills, jolts, ascents, and descents of our uncharted adventures. Hello, everybody. Today, my guest is Michelle Nyrop, a lucky girl with wings, dreams, and an insatiable desire to do good. Welcome to The Mountain in Us. We are grateful to have you here to share your remarkable trails, triumphs, and detours with us. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Taryn. And I'm super excited to be here and spend some time with you. And I love that we get to talk about things that are really near and dear to me. My Minnesota nice, how that's led me on this incredible journey filled with some grit and picking up and grounding myself in wisdom along the way. So I love the topic and excited to spend time talking to you about it today.
Yeah, same here. And we're going to dive right into Minnesota nice. And I know you left your small town in Minnesota at the age of 20 to study abroad.
I
That
did.
wanderlust driving you, where did it originate, right? What was it, the small town? Give us what
Yeah.
made you go study abroad from that small place.
Yeah, I grew up in a very small town. I think there were 100 people in my graduating class. And I famously said, I've traveled a lot, but it all started with this desire to get outside of my space. And it's interesting, we talk about Minnesota nice, and I've been thinking about Minnesota nice a lot, and I think what Minnesota nice means to me, and this leads me to why I wanted to venture out, is it's not about naivete, right? Don't ever confuse Minnesota nice with naivete. That's not what it looks like. It's also not nice, like I'm not afraid, or you're fearful, or you're fearful of conflict, or you're fearful of hard things. To me, I think Minnesota nice is just this innate desire to engage. I'm the one, walking down. I'm sure I did it as a little kid in my little town, walking down the street saying good morning and hello to everybody. A Minnesotan if you're in a big city and there's, one of us walking down the street with a big smile and saying hello to everyone. It's this just innate desire to engage, right? To learn from people, to talk to people. And so my mom and dad never traveled when I was a kid. We never went far. I think, we never left the Midwest for sure. My mom and dad would put my sister and I on the back of their Harley Davidson motorcycles and off we would go. So I feel like that wanderlust, that like I want to go out and experience something, even if my parents never made it very far, right? But it was still this just desire to get on the open road. And it would make my sister and I absolutely nuts because we would say, "Where are we going?" And my mom and dad would say, "We're going crazy,"
Yeah,
which was so annoying as a little kid because you can't then ask the question that every child asks drive their parents crazy on the road trip, right? Which is, are we there yet? Because if there's not a there, you can't be there yet. And
yeah,
so, it's something that was so simple when I was a kid. What I've reflected on as I've grown up is how important that concept of we're going crazy has been to me because it's this open-ended desire to go somewhere. And the destination doesn't even matter. It's get out and
yeah.
experience, right? Get out and experience, get out and explore. My mom and dad, 2 weeks before I left to study abroad in the UK, drove to Minneapolis to see what an airport looked like. We didn't have a lot of money. We didn't travel. And so that was a really big deal at the age of 20. And my parents would have been in their 40s that they drove to the airport to see what an airport looked like before they put their eldest daughter on
Yeah.
an airplane and sent her off. And so that sort of began my, ever, sort of never ending quest to get out into the world and engage with people. And, I'm blissfully married to a Minnesota nice husband, and so it works out really well for us. But still to this day, right? We're the two walking in the streets of Tokyo, or walking in the streets of Hyderabad, or walking in the streets of New York City, smiling and engaging and saying good morning and hello to everyone. Chatting
Yeah.
up the cab driver, the bartender. And I think that's where when you think about wisdom, because I know wisdom is part of what we're talking about today. it occurs to me wisdom isn't about being smart and teaching and telling. It's about being open and listening and learning. And I think, it's amazing what I've learned from cab drivers, what I've
Yeah,
learned from bartenders, right? What I've learned from someone sitting next to me on a bench in a park. It's just that engagement and that sort of
yeah.
experiencing the world in such a different way.
Do you think when you talk about that one, right? Do you think that growing up in a small town where everybody knows everybody and everybody has to face everybody and everybody has to be good to everybody, that normally when you expanded your world, you didn't care how big the world become, that for you it is still your small town, that you go out and have the same outlook for the bigger world that you are in.
I think so, right? And that's again, you go back to it's always about your parents, that you would treat the person who's bussing your table at a restaurant as well as you would teach treat your pastor or your teacher or your boss. That's because to your point, they're my community. And so that I think that just you can't unlearn that. That just is who you are. And I always feel bad for people who, will boast about, well, they've traveled the world and, you can be a tourist or you can be a traveler. To me, they're very different things, right? If you're a
Yeah,
tourist, the people on your journey are there to serve you and make your journey comfortable. That's not how I see people, right? When I'm out in the world, I don't see them as being there to make me comfortable. I see them, right, as people I want to better understand, people that I want to know. And I think as an HR professional, that served me exceptionally well because, I got to be out in the world and experiencing things. And I always figure like as an HR person, you're not necessarily smarter than the people that you coach and support, but what you have done is seen more patterns of human relationships, right? And when people engage with each other, you watch the patterns and you see what works and doesn't work. And then you use those learnings, right? So when you think about wisdom, to me, it's about experiencing the world, paying attention to what you're seeing and hearing, putting it in your pocket, right? Like hanging on to it and knowing what those patterns look like so that when somebody needs something or you need something to solve a problem, you're
yeah.
kind of pulling it out of your pocket and using it. And the genius to it is knowing when to pull out what, right? It's paying attention to it, holding on to it, but then knowing what to pull out when to support the people that you're coaching has
Yeah.
been, I think, an incredible gift for me.
Oh, and I can attest to that, and and we'll talk about that in our conversation today too. But just hanging on to that the plane ride that you took at age 20, and as you were looking down at Minnesota from all of these 10,000 lakes as you're flying out of this Minnesota wonderland, were you seeding your dreams? Were you always in HR? How did that journey of choosing this path to human heart through the HR, how did that come to life and fruition for you?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think, my choices on my career sort of happened later. I think what that did do was it seeded in me the skills that I was going to need later. It also made me a little fearless. I remember like flying away from Minnesota, exhilaration, excitement. Like I love the idea of reinventing myself and going somewhere else. It more turned into like, oh my God, fear. Like, what have I done? Like, this is a very different place. And look, England is about as not different as you can get to the US, but for a 20-year-old, it was a big deal. And I remember, I took multiple planes, a train, a bus, finally made it to my dorm room, flopped on the bed, cried for hours, and then sat up and went, huh, do just about anything, because I hadn't really been tested, right? The beauty of a small town is it's a pretty safe little place. And so I'd never been tested of like, what can I do? And so I think what that did do for me after I had chosen a career in HR was get me to say yes when someone said, hey, would you like to go do HR in Hong Kong? Right? Because, if I wouldn't have done that, I think I wouldn't have had the courage to pick up my family and move to Hong Kong and try to do my craft there. And when I fell into HR because I realized that I could have a bigger impact than in any other job, right? That you can touch more people. I had how many 70,000 people, I've been able to touch as an HR professional. As a leader, that's hard to do. But to test myself to say, can you do HR in a place where everybody is different, right? So all those patterns that we talked about, right? It's different now. And so you had to think too. And I think it really did help my first, time living abroad to say I had to learn a different language. That was still English. And look, they spoke English in Hong Kong too. But the language of the connections, right? Like we didn't listen to the same music. We didn't understand the same humor, right? Our sort of the lingo was different. Our everything about the culture that I'd grown up in was different there. And in order to connect with my fellow students back when I was a young person, I had to learn some new things. Same thing applied when I got to Hong Kong, right? And all of a sudden you're like, how am I going to connect to people who like, I rely on stories and I'm a pretty funny gal, right? So I rely on stories and a good joke. None of those were going to work there. And so for me, the courage to be able to go do it, the understanding that I had to think differently and really understand differently how to connect with people. But that, going back to the early part of our conversation, the innate desire to do that drove me, right, to figure out like, how am I going to connect with these people, right?
Yeah.
How am I going to do that? How do I get them to respect me? How do I better understand them so I know how to motivate them? So I think all of those things definitely led me, sort of into each of the sort of career choices and personal choices that I've made.
Yeah. And you beautifully says, like the culture reset of the culture when you are in a new space. And I like what the tears that you mentioned, the tears are now the tears of joy, and the tears nurtured so many of your dreams and so much of your journey. I'm sure there must be, tough moments, more tougher, challenging moments where you had to, not even just pull out the Minnesota nice in a different way, but also had to take the Midwestern resilience and put it to test. An HR can be brutal at many times, right? When you have to make tough decisions with people, right? Talk to us a little bit about that. How have you built that resilience and still be able to have a heart and have it smile and not be this, the auto cop HR person.
Yeah, it's not easy. It's funny because my Minnesota Nice, I've had a love-hate relationship with it my whole life because people do sort of misunderstand and misconstrue it as I'm not tough and I can't do hard things, and so you actually have to work a little bit harder when you have a demeanor like mine. You have to work a little bit harder to make sure that people still know that you can take tough decisions, that you can deal with difficult people, right? And I just think it's interesting. I was thinking about how did I over time have to shift and change to be able to do that? And I think there's a saying, right, that says perfection is the enemy of progress. And I think that that's probably true. But I also think, particularly as an HR person, altruism is the enemy of progress. And you start as a young person, and certainly coming out of college, you probably did too, right? Where you're very altruistic about how the world is and how the world should work. And there's right and there's wrong and there's good and there's bad. And I've had to continue to reroute those things in my life. I would say you start with this box of tolerance of what you think is okay. And over time, if you don't shift that box of tolerance, you actually become deeply ineffective, right? You have to be able to say, okay, but like and one of the things, if I go back to my experience in Hong Kong, the best thing that taught me was that like I am not personally the arbiter of right or wrong, good or bad, rude, not rude, right? That like my ideas of what those things aren't the world's ideas of what they are. And when you're living in someone else's culture, you have to understand that there are different shades of what those things look like, and I think that over time, in order to make an impact in a role like mine, you've got to be less altruistic. It doesn't mean that I still don't have, sort of high standards for myself and high standards for integrity, and that there aren't still lines on that box, right? There's
Yeah.
still, you can still step outside of it, but,
Is there a particular story, or is, not that I have to know the fuller details, but is there some story that you think, hey, that changed my perspective? And I like what you said on being altruistic, especially when you are trying to deal with people, because the tolerance can be infinite, and people, people can naturally take advantage of you, and as an HR, your goal is to let the whole work environment not get compromised by people those who are going to
Yes.
shake up that tolerance. So is
And
there a story? Yeah, go ahead.
yeah. A couple things come to mind, and I was at a speaker series once back in one of my previous roles, where we had a senior female leader who had had a very big and difficult job for the government, and she had, which meant that she had to work with dictators and very difficult, pretty awful people. And I remember someone in the audience asking, like, how could you work with those people or work for those people, right? And almost in a bit of an accusatory way. And her answer was so brilliant and it stuck with me. And this will lead me to how I put it in practice. But her answer was pretty simply, what if I wouldn't have? Right? So if you're so altruistic that you can't work with those people, you walk away, and the situation, those people, those leaders, that situation never gets better. But if you're only going to go in if it's like, well, these are great people and I can fix them, I think you leave a lot on the table. And so I've had a couple of times, and one not too far in my past, where I was working with a really not great leader, right? Not somebody who I looked up to, not somebody who I thought had integrity or like met my personal values, but somebody that it was my job to support. And that somebody impacted tens of thousands of people. I would walk in knowing that I can't fix that person, but I can make it better every day, right? What if I wouldn't? And so I think for me, that sort of grit and resilience over time has really looked at how can I just keep making it better, right? I know that, and certainly there are situations when the best thing you can do is walk away, but whether it's a person, a problem, an organization, a situation, can you just go into it with this notion of, I'm going to make it better. And so I think for me, that's how I've sort of pushed through it. I do think my Minnesota Nice helped, but I can also say really difficult things to you because you trust me, right? Your guard's not up because I'm not coming at you without some kind of a relationship, without some like step back and think about, what do you care about and why would you want to have this conversation with me? And then I'm going to go in and I'm going to lower the hammer, right? I'm going to have a hard conversation with you, but you're going to know that it's rooted in just honesty and care, right? And
Yeah.
so I do think, I've had people who've said to me, like, I wouldn't give you a job because I need people, like that can break glass, that are tough. That's okay. But most people will figure out I'm tougher than almost all of them. It just doesn't look the same as
Yeah.
everyone else, right? And so
Yeah.
it is both a blessing and a curse. But I coming out the end of my career, 30 years later, I will say way more blessing than curse.
Yeah. Yeah. No, having, coming from a small town, but what you said here, stuck both the self-awareness muscle that you pull into these situations. It's harder as humans even to be self-aware, but especially when you're dealing with so many people and trying to support so many, it is remarkable that how permeable that nice is in delivering an effective way of working, but also something that is not going to, you can't, if you break a glass, you pay the price of replacing the window, right? But if you can open up a door,
Absolutely.
if you open up a door, you have new pathways created, right? And I think, and that's where we met at Gap, and you could, I still remember the round table where we first sat and looking out of the bay, and we worked in totally different departments, and I just and you were able to bring these people from different threads of, even at Gap, come together and generally create a environment for not just for me but for all of us to be able to do more than anything that I would have ever imagined, right? And that is, I was my first book and I didn't know what to do with it, and I just approached and it happened. um, Being a little bit selfish here, but I know you've probably done this to many people. I'm just probably one of them. How does Michelle, this, you talked about being not being that altruistic, but you're so selfless in many ways in creating those pathways. How did that magic portion develop in you?
If only I knew, right? Well, it's funny that you say like sort of selfless, because I always say to people, be wary of the person, a mentor, somebody who wants you want to have a mentor. Be really wary of the mentor who thinks it's a selfless act, because it's not, And so people all the time will say, I had someone I was on the phone with last week, just trying to help her think through some issues that she was having. And she's like, I just feel like I'm getting like, what do you get out of this relationship? You put so much into it. Like, I give you nothing. I'm like, you're wrong. You're wrong, right? Like, I actually, none of it is, it's probably selfish, if nothing else. Because again, if you remember what motivates me is the engagement. Right. And so, like, I get really excited when you're bringing different people together, and I think that, so for me, if you think I walked out of any of those, whether it's you and I just having a conversation one on one or me sitting with a group of people, I'm getting as much out of it as anybody else is. Right. And I think, one of the things that I've always done, a practice that I've always had at least in the last 10 years of my career, is to carve out a particular percent of every single week to meet with people that I don't need to currently get my job done. Because you can easily fill your calendar. I know, right? Like, I've had really big jobs, so I get it. Like, you can easily fill your calendar with people that you just need to get things done, and you transact all day. But I would always find time to meet with people. You're sowing the seeds, right? Which maybe someday they'll help you get work done, but that's not why you're meeting with them, right? And like, sometimes you help them solve things, sometimes they help you solve things, sometimes you just catch up and talk about the weather. It kind of doesn't matter, right? But at the end of the day, in having those conversations, you're extracting, right? Again, like, that's where, to me, that's where the wisdom comes. It's like, those are the seeds that sow the wisdom, if you're smart enough to do it. But you don't have time or energy when you're just transacting with people, right? Because you're just getting stuff done. You're not taking the time. And I'm pretty type A. If we're going to transact, I'm going to transact. I don't want to talk about the weather or your kids, and we're going to get right to work, right? Like I'm pretty efficient in my work, right? But I want the engagement. I just want to carve time out and have it just be about that. And so the things that I've learned from people along the way doing that are pretty significant. So yeah, I would say, for me, it all stems back to that. And, I love the fact that there are people that I can point to that are doing things today that they never would have done. A merchant at Gap that's now the head of diversity and inclusion for, a massive global company, because of conversations that we had, right? Like, that, nothing, what could you want more in life than to get to be part of that? That feeds my soul. So there's nothing selfless about that.
Yeah, for the record, nothing selfish, but so I'm going to, I'm thankful for that engagement. And we've traveled, and we are here today after so many years, but just what you do, and part of this grounding wisdom that you have, even though it might not seem selfless, but I think it's just enabling people to think and propel their own journeys by those engagement has always been something that I cherish and remember, and also put into practice wherever I can, and try to incorporate in my life. And going back to the beginning here now, you recently traveled with your mother, and I think that was Scotland. I forgot where you told me, but how was that feeling, right? That now you're traveling with your mom, at is it deja vu kind of scenario when hey, you dropped me at the airport at a gate. Now we're traveling through these gates together, and looking at the world from a different angle.
Oh, it's the best, right? It was one of the Biggest reasons that I decided to step away from corporate life and spend more time with my family because it's precious. And so, yeah, my mom will always say that she lives vicariously through me, and she's been able to travel because I've lived in different places around the globe, and she's been able to come visit me, and I'll take her on my video camera and walk her through places. So, she's been to the Taj Mahal, even if she's never been to the Taj Mahal because she was on my phone, right? So I love to bring her with me because I think so much of who I am I get from her, and so she is just the most willing, wide-eyed participant. I love that she doesn't take herself too seriously. She doesn't have agenda. She's just ready to hop on the train and come with me. But to experience it, through her is such a blessing. And so we had a wonderful, wonderful time together. And I love the spillover effect of, I feel so fortunate for the career and the life that I've had and the things that I've been able to do, and the spillover effect of what that's meant for people like my mom, who's got to experience the world and she never would have otherwise, right? For my son, who's, speaks fluent Mandarin because he went to school for a few years, the spillover effect of the people in your life. And then you think about the spillover effect that then that kind of keeps growing and they share it with people. And, he'll, I'm sure, go somewhere abroad and take a family, and that will just continue for us. But being able to spend time with her and being able to play a role in her experiencing more of the world. I think I grew up in a small town. My mother grew up in on a farm, and when she went to a one-room schoolhouse where everybody from first grade through eighth grade, we were all in one room. So if you think, I think, wow, I never expected my life to turn out like this. Imagine what it feels like to her,
Yeah.
and so it was absolutely a blessing.
Good. And was there a particular spot or or particular space when you were traveling together that has remained with you, and you've said, okay, I'm going to click this and put it in a Polaroid, and because I'm going to remember this for and you're like, I like sometimes I just because we take so many pictures, but there's few pictures that I print so that I can remember those moments in a way that help me further further carve out those experiences in the future because of just how we are, right? Because is there a space or a place that you remember that you said, oh, Tara, this is a place where I really love taking her, and that's can you share any of those moments with us?
It took me a while to learn how to slow down. You probably could, if you worked a long time, you could experience this. Like, it's really hard to slow down, and so I've really come to appreciate more the sort of very quiet, not big moments, right? But like those very
Yeah.
quiet moments. And so, yeah, getting to just sit. We went to we were in London for a couple of days, and we spent most of our time in Ireland, and sitting on the cliffs of Moher, and you feel like a tiny speck, right, with the sea and the cliffs and the waves, and just sitting there quietly. So to me, it's not the big stuff anymore. It's just those, like, to your point, I just want to remember this moment, listening to the waves and just sitting there, and the sun came out, which didn't do that very often in Ireland, as you can imagine. But the sun came out for a minute. There was a rainbow. We were just sitting on these beautiful, beautiful cliffs together, and I just remember feeling really grateful. So for me,
Yeah.
whenever I travel, it's those quiet moments where you're just kind of sitting there, and for some reason, you just remind yourself, gosh, I'm so grateful for this moment, right? It's not the splashy stuff. It's just the quiet time.
Yeah. No, yeah, that's such a remarkable pause to share. And when you were saying that, and I was thinking, oh, maybe we should, you can take that picture and put it on the roller coaster. Hey, we didn't scream on these ones, but the scream inside became silent.
I did take her on a roller coaster once. It was not pretty. She had never been on a roller coaster. But I took her once, and it was, she'll never do it again. But I love the thing that I love the most about her. She tried oysters, even if she hates them. Like, I love that you can, no matter how old you get, right, that you still want to try new things. And, even if you're going to hate it, but you're like, no, but I want to experience this because we're doing it together is pretty cool.
Yeah. No, yeah, no, this has been, first of all, a great journey to talk to you and learn a lot about just how your perspective on bigger things, smaller things, and in life in general. Before I let you go for the day, anything sparkly from your big circles that you would like to share with the audience, especially, even though you say small town, I see the big universe in that small town, right? And that sparkle is resonating everywhere you have gone. So, and I'm one of the prime examples here, right? So I just want to see if it's anything you want to share and with us as your last, some of your closing words for this episode.
What I wish I would have probably learned. I never have regrets because I think regrets are, they're a terrible thing, because if anything would have gone differently in my life, right, good or bad, I wouldn't be sitting here having this conversation with you, and I would hate that, right? Like, I love where I am right now, so I never have regrets. But one, you can still have, I wish I would have been better at earlier in my life, right? Sort of not being so worried. As much as I was, never really focused on the destination, I definitely, like everybody else, had worries about the things along the way. And I remember a good friend of mine, when I was living in Asia, turned me on to this wonderful, wonderful, and I'm going to paraphrase it at best probably here, but it was a Chinese proverb. And, I remember it's one of those things I tucked in my pocket and I've shared so many times, but I just think it's such a powerful one with so much uncertainty in the world, and what people have right now with their jobs or anything else that's going on in their life, because it gets you to stop worrying. I mean, the bird doesn't care. The branch can break. It doesn't matter. It will fly to another branch, right? The world is always changing, right? Your job can change, your situation can change, but just focus on your flight, right? Just focus on what's making you better, what's making you stronger, what's making you more prepared, what's giving you the strength. And I think, I wish I would have thought about that. And I've shared that so many times with, it's again one of those things you tuck away, and it just kind of comes out at a perfect time when people are worried about your job. Don't worry about your job, right? Jobs will come and jobs will go, but worry about your flight. What's making you stronger? What's giving you more utility? What new experiences can you have, right? What new people can you connect with that will make you stronger, right? Because all of those things will make you not worry. And I think the minute that I stopped worrying, the freedom that came with that, right? I was doing the best work of my life. I was a better partner. I was a better parent. You just, shift your thinking on those things. And so when I think about my journey now, I think about it like a bird. And some of the branches that I landed on were strong and wonderful. And, but the hard part was then leaving them, because they were comfortable and strong and wonderful. And some of them were very scary. And I got myself into situations where I was like, ooh, like, I'm not good at this, or I don't think I can do this job, or, whatever the case may be. And it was okay too, and so I just, like, now versus a map, I almost think about it as just, I'm a bird just flying from tree to tree.
No, and thank you for gracing us with your wings, dreams, and such grounding perspective. It was so nice to have you on the show, and I look forward to a further conversation and getting you back here for our next season. Thank you, Michelle. Have a great day. Thank you for joining us on the Conversation Trails of the Mountain in Us podcast. Each episode here is crafted with love, adventure, and reflection. We hope you have enjoyed this one, and we welcome your thoughts on it. And if you want to be on the show, feel free to reach out.